was chasing something and I didn't know what I was chasing, honestly. Money, bigger roles, all of them, none of them. My startup went from, I was number 4 or number 5. We were 200 plus and then came back to zero in a period where you work so hard and nothing to show for it. In hindsight, every role has taught me a lot. So I wouldn't change anything. Thermax for a period in between had stopped growing. I'm not humble by any means. I may be soft-spoken.
Decisiveness and fail fast if you have to fail kind of an approach is always encouraged. This is the India of today, as you rightly said, which is different from the India of a decade back. Super competitive, but humble at the same time. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on where you are joining us from for this very special first episode of season 2 of Towards a Better World on Thinkly, where I, your host, Ayon Banerjee, bring to you some of the most inspirational people of our times. After concluding our first season that featured 2 child prodigies and who will probably bring home the Nobel to India one day, the ex-chairman of General Electric Company, the president of Tata Power Renewables, a doyen of Indian financial services industry, an HR leader who was named as the Indian Achiever of the Year 2023, and an A-list movie star stroke pop sensation. I am thrilled to kick off a new season with a highly celebrated CEO of one of the most respected Indian organizations for this Leadership 101 today. While actually, truthfully speaking, he doesn't need a formal introduction, but I am honored to welcome Mr. Ashish Bhandari, the MD and the CEO of Thermax Limited. Ashish is an alumnus of IIT Bombay and an MBA from Duke University. He spent the initial phase of his career in the United States with organizations like El Paso and McKinsey before joining GE, where he steadily rose through the ranks in GE in the US and thereafter in GE India, where he served as the CEO for GE's oil and gas business that it took to great heights, and we'll talk about this later. And eventually, he transitioned to Baker Hughes as the regional VP after the demerger. Ashish joined Thermax in 2020, just at the onset of the pandemic. And in these 4+ years, he has been instrumental in transforming Thermax into one of the front runners in India Inc.'s energy transition journey. I am just so excited to have Ashish on the show and to learn from him. And so, without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Ashish Bhandari to Towards a Better World. Welcome, Ashish.
Ayon, thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
No, Ashish, it's my turn to say you thanks. I know you have a super busy schedule and you just got back from the Saudi, and we really appreciate that you took time out of your busy schedule and gave us this slot. So don't want to waste a single moment while you are with us live, Ashish. So let us dive into the first question, Ashish. It's about your career. What's always intrigued me about your career, Ashish, is its non-linearity. I mean, it's never been a conventional straight line, point A to point B transition like it happens with most MNC leaders, if you know what I mean. I mean, being an IITian who was working at McKinsey in the US, you chose to go work for GE in the US. And later, you moved to GE in India, where you were part of the power leadership team when I met you. And then you again went back to GE, South Asia's oil and gas business, as the CEO, and which you, like I said, you took it to great heights. And subsequently, of course, which became Baker Hughes after the demerger. And then now, for the past 4 years, you've been leading this Indian MNC Thermax that you've completely transformed into a new avatar. So the first question, Ashish, is a 2-part question. So, A, how do you choose your next assignment? I mean, is it a natural career progression, or is it an act of deliberate design? That is, you decide that this is what I need to do next. And the second part, Ashish, is how different has been your approach and your personal leadership playbook in each of these assignments? And if I can ask you a supplementary question to the second part, is that which one among your diverse assignments, and there have been very diverse assignments, so which one has been the most challenging one, and which one has been the most rewarding one among all your assignments, Ashish?
And I'll try and do justice to all 3 questions that you have asked. There's a part of my career which is before McKinsey and Business School, which is Schlumberger, which is oil field services working in the Middle East. And the reason I would like to start there is that if you take right from IIT and even my days at IIT, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a very long time. And I don't know when it changed from not knowing what I wanted to do and going wherever life took you to then getting a sense of being a bit more directive in terms of how to structure my career. So in that sense, the career itself is two parts. Yeah, the first part where I perhaps was still growing up, making lots of mistakes along the way, if I may use that word. Those mistakes taught me a lot. The biggest mistake was that of not being patient. Yeah, when I was at Schlumberger in oil field services, why is this industry so slow? I'm stuck offshore for weeks in a row. I missed my engagement because I couldn't come home. I was in now exotic places like Syria and Egypt, but that time it felt like you were nowhere. Then when I was at McKinsey, all the action was in startups. So I wanted to go join a startup. That didn't work out. Join El Paso. Enron happened. So El Paso didn't work out. So it was like one thing after another where I was chasing something and I didn't know what I was chasing, honestly. Money, bigger roles, all of them, none of them, nothing at all. So actually, when I joined GE, I joined in a sales role with everything of my past other than my experience kind of wiped out. And so the 15 years that I spent at GE and 5 career roles that I had at GE, I'm immensely thankful for. And in that period, I gave myself to the leadership in the sense that I said, I'm just going to put my head down and see where life takes me. And what that meant was looking not at what am I doing, but focusing on what am I learning. Yeah, am I really learning something that is making me better? Every leadership course that I had at GE taught me something, and I was at a point in my life that I was ready to absorb from everything. Yeah, so I wanted to become a better leader. I wanted to. My bosses said, go into product marketing. I said, okay, I'll go into product marketing. Go into small P&L. One day I got a phone call saying, would you consider moving to India for 2 years? John Flannery is coming up, setting up a new business out there. Went back, had a hour's discussion with my wife, came back next day, okay, we are moving to India. India after 2 years, Banmali came in saying, would you consider staying on? Sure. So after those 4 or 5 roles, by the time I was in my mid 40s, that became the point where some of those sleepless nights started to come about, where you start to question, what have I learned? What I've learned, am I starting to do justice to that or not? And then when I was clear, I didn't want to continue in an oil and gas company when Baker Hughes had happened, then I became very choosy about what I wanted to do next. Yeah. And so Thermax was done after a lot of choice and thinking. My interview process with Thermax was 11 months. Thermax had not had an leader from the outside. I had not worked with an Indian company. So that last part was deliberate. A good portion of the career was not deliberate. Yeah. And in my personal case, it took me a long time to figure out what is it that I wanted to do in life. That doesn't mean that those experiences were not valuable. They were immensely valuable. Which was my toughest experience? My toughest experience was the startup that I did in DC. I'd left McKinsey. I quit McKinsey. We were driving from Houston to DC when I learned we were pregnant. My wife was pregnant. And so we reached DC, didn't know anyone. That was the hardest I worked. We were working 14, 15 hours every day. And then my startup went from I was number 4 or number 5. We were 200 plus and then came back to zero in a period where you worked so hard and nothing to show for it. Had a baby along the way, didn't have a green card, nothing at all. So it was a stressful period in that sense, which has been the most satisfying. I think almost every career, especially in hindsight, every role has taught me a lot. So I wouldn't change anything. But if I say which one I think I'm making a most amount of difference in, that would be my current role at Thermax. Yeah, the scope, size, the ability to make a difference. It is at a level that I haven't had the opportunity before, and I think I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Great answer, Ashish. And there are some new things here for me. I didn't know that you had joined GE in a sales role. I always thought that you were a product marketing leader in GE when you came to India, at least, when you came to India in the GE power role. And some parts I know, the John Flannery part, because we actually had John Flannery in the last season. He came for the first podcast here, and so I know that part. And I also know, I can connect the dots when I think we had a conversation sometime when you had just joined Thermax in the early parts of your Thermax time. And I could, you mentioned that there is so much to do here. And especially, this organization is an iconic organization. And you had such a formidable predecessor, Mr. Unnikrishnan. And to take it from already such an iconic status to what you've done, Ashish, so that's commendable, and that's what makes us admire you so much. So let me move to Thermax, Ashish. So there's a lot of learning for mid managers who are aspiring for a career like yours. So at Thermax, which has been obviously as I said, one of the best known and a highly respected Indian organization that our generation of Indian engineers grew up admiring. But what stands out in your stint at the helm of Thermax, besides the great numbers, of course, which speak for themselves, is the extent of organizational transformation that Thermax has gone through under your leadership. Whether it was your diversification across the energy spectrum, create entities and P&Ls for each of your businesses, your globalization strategy, your digitalization journey, and your entire positioning of Thermax as a front runner in India's energy transition. So why don't you share with us, Ashish, about the Thermax of today and your vision for the organization from where you've steered it in the past 4+ years, and where do you propose to see it in, say, 5 years from now?
Sure. So first, I think, Ayon, I would want to make it clear. The company, the way I got it, and the whole history, is just incredible. So I by no means want to come out as somebody who's taking credit for some transformation, which by any means is also something that we are in the journey towards. Yeah, we are far away from coming and saying we have transformed, or that the ship as it was something that needed extensive rework. Yeah, it is a fabulous company. And just in terms of, let me go back then in terms of why did I join Thermax in the first place? And I said I was choosy. When I joined Thermax, there were 3 things that I looked for, which attracted me. First was the values of the company itself, and coming from GE, which I thought the values from everything that I had heard, the way the company ran, the way it treated people, all of those, they gelled with my own background and my own personal values. So that was a big part of the checkbox. The second part was it was B2B industrials. And my last 15, 20 years were all getting and understanding that elephant of B2B industrials from various different points of view. Yeah, some successes, many failures. Yeah, and the GE part, especially the last few years, taught me a lot about failing as well. Yeah, and businesses failing in a way, which is a whole different discussion when perhaps you touch those topics with John and maybe even Dipesh in some ways. And seeing those taught me a lot about if I got the opportunity, what I would like to do different. Third was the opportunity to work with a company that was in the midst of energy transition, which means it had a lot going for it, but perhaps a lot not going for it as well. In some ways, just what GE had gone through. So it fascinated me to work with a company where you were not coming at it like a startup saying, this is my story and this is what we are going to do. You were working with a big ship that was moving in a particular direction, and you had to come in and say, what direction do we want to go in, and then how do I turn the ship in that direction, and working through that period with some amazing people who were extremely talented, very capable, and by all means technically a lot smarter than I was in those subjects and I ever will be. Yeah, so almost every one of our product lines, whether it's chillers, boilers, water treatment, air pollution control, lot of the chemicals, everything that we do, the domain expertise that comes with it is not something that I had and not something that I aspire to have either. So then the question was, what does Thermax mean? And there, I think my big realization was that Thermax, for a period in between, had stopped growing. And it had stopped growing because it took its call to action to be doing complex engineering projects, which became the DNA of the company. Yeah, which means we are good engineers. We can do like a Reliance J3 large project. We can do Dangote. And then as and when those projects came, FGDs, all of that, we would go up. And then when those projects went away, we would come down. But we would look to the environment to shape us. And I went back thinking, how do our customers think of Thermax? Yeah, what do they think of? What are fundamental skills that we have? Engineering and all of that were enablers. They were not to me, they're not the DNA of the company. The amazing part, which is a complete, not something that I knew about Thermax, was that Thermax touches the core of India's industrial sector like no other company does, which means you have the refining, petrochemical, steel, cement, the big names and the big orders, power that show up. But Thermax works with a Haldiram, a Sun Pharma, the attire companies, whether it is Bridgestone or MRF, with textiles, with commercial buildings, food, edible oils, ethanol plants, distilleries, everyone. And we work through 100 plus channel partners in that exercise. And to me was the realization, which is no rocket science, which is that all of these industries, if we took a far enough view, which was 2030, in 2021, right as COVID got over, we did our first board retreat. And we used that board retreat to talk about what Thermax of 2030 could look like and what the world of 2030 and beyond could look like. It took us away from all the COVID discussions and everything on. And we could go look at a world much further out. And there, the realization was clear that every one of the industries that Thermax touches will go through a big change. And it will go through a big change because of 5 factors. One, energy transition and climate change will drive big changes. 2, the entire urbanization that you're seeing in India, where things like water, air will no longer be freely available. They will be extremely tight. You will have digital capabilities coming in. The entire technology spectrum was changing and the geopolitics were getting complicated. So then the question came that Thermax had great connect with these customers. We had good engineering capabilities. We had good trust with our customers, where customer after customer told me that what they loved about Thermax was it was not a company that backed out. It made mistakes, but it would always be there. Learn from its mistakes, keep coming back. I love that attitude. So we transitioned, we talked about being a partner to our customers as our customers went through energy transition. Yeah, so then that meant that we had to pivot on few vectors, and there were six very, very specific vectors, and that those, and I don't want to use consulting mumbo jumbo, that little part of my brain from consulting still stays, but that's a very small part of my brain. But I like the building blocks to what will it take to become that partner in energy transition. And now we are working those six blocks continuously. Yeah, that is for the last 3+ years, we are just working those six blocks. It has got organization change aspects, capabilities, it has got financial aspects, variety. But that is the transition, that is the work that we are doing. We have barely taken few steps on that journey. And each year we come back and calibrate, are we making progress? Is the fight the right fight to fight? Are we climbing that mountain the way we thought we would be climbing? What's working well? What's not working well? All of that. Through all of this, I think we've been very fortunate. India has been going through a good cycle, which means it is a time that you can take some bets, you can take some risks. A good portion of the core of Thermax is performing extremely well. Perhaps if I took 8, 10 years ago, perhaps wouldn't have worked as well. Yes, I know I'm in a fortunate part of the cycle, and that part of the cycle I cannot take for granted for the future. So hopefully a long answer, but gives you a perspective of what we are trying to do.
Of course, Ashish. So such a great articulation of what Thermax is doing, and much of this knowledge, much of this information is in public domain. But what you articulated and explained so well, and that's what makes us so proud of an Indian organization, like you said, which is touching every corner of every industry in India. And it's not just restricted to a single, like a power or an oil and gas segment, but yeah, and it's such a great feeling that this, and the way you said it, Ashish, so that's what makes you so humble. And I've always told you this. So let me move
I
to
may interrupt you on that count, just as I'm not humble by any means. I may be soft spoken, but I'm not humble. At least I don't consider myself. I've seen many, much truly humble leaders. I am competitive in my bones, and I'll leave it at that. The second bit, which is about the Indian company, I think if we come in and say that there is a way to behave like an Indian company, I may agree with. But if we come and say that as an Indian company, should you aspire for anything less than the best globally, that I disagree with. In the sense that India, if we have to become something meaningful in the world, which I think we are on the path of, many Indian companies in many Indian spaces will have to aspire to be best in what they do. And their benchmark can't be another company in India. Their benchmark has to be globally, are you doing stuff which is important and relevant? And in many examples of energy transition, and for example, in heating, Thermax works a lot with biomass. Yeah, and how do you get various different kinds of biomass waste into useful forms of energy is a very unique India problem. And the kinds of ways in which we solve this, we are in many ways the best in the world. Yeah, you could put us in front of anybody, anywhere, and we can do things that very few globally can do. Yeah, and even on the large boiler side, many of our global technology partners have gone out of business. Thermax is only increasing in its capability and competency. In things like heat pumps and what all we have achieved, we think we are very unique in terms of what we are doing globally as well. And even where we are coming up with digital solutions, our benchmark is not to come up with something that is priced well for India. We want to be able to put out capabilities that are for the products that we provide as good as anybody in the world, if not better. And I'm proud to say that our digital solutions is an example. The world's largest food manufacturer is implementing in their plants globally. It's not just for India. We are implementing it globally. Yeah. And I think that is something that Indian companies across the board will have to aspire to and are already aspiring from what I can see. Yeah. So I think you can go to your next question.
Thank you, Ashish. And this is perfectly what I wanted to bring out. Which you answered that. This is the India of today, as you rightly said. Which is different from the India of a decade back, which is super competitive but humble at the same time. And your organization is a complete embodiment of that, Ashish. So
And
let me
no
move.
humbleness in that answer, though.
So let me move to leadership essentials, Ashish, which is the crux and core of this podcast. And I think we have kind of touched upon some of these in the previous question, but Thermax indeed a remarkable journey, Ashish. And now knowing you, Ashish, personally for about 13 years now, and I always, like you just yourself confess, that you are a soft spoken, and you didn't confess to being humble, but I think that you are a very super humble human being, despite your stellar bio. It always amazes me on how you go about building businesses and creating winning teams in your quintessential, unassuming style, which is a rarity because in today's chest thumping, self aggrandizing world of social media influence leadership, yours is very different. So obviously, every person's leadership toolkit is subjective and it cannot be bottled as a formula. But if I may ask you your top three priorities that you focus as a leader in any assignment that you take on, and which, when done well, take care of the rest of the priorities. So this question is kind of a leadership Pareto for Ashish Bhandari. So what would that answer be, Ashish?
And I look like you put out in front. Yeah, we all admire leaders from our personal lives, people that have influenced us, and people that we see all around, and from history as well. Yeah, I'm a big history buff, so we admire people from all various different kinds, and over time we come to realize that we are our own person and our best way to be the best leader we can. And while we are always learning and we are always improving, we are improving from as individuals who we are. Yeah. And there are many, many, many ways to be a good leader. There's just not one. And I know you're a sports buff as well. And we see in sports, there are many different leaders who become successful in their own ways. I'll share my three bits. And these three bits have, at least as I look at myself, is something that seems to work for me. Yeah, and others may have their own bits. For me, the single biggest, and of the three, that one is to me more 34%, and the other two 33 in that sense, is what gets me out of bed in the morning and gets me to work. Yep. I'm lazy at heart. I can just as easily curl up with a book or travel around the world and do something. I think it is important for me to believe that I come to work for a reason. We all do, and we don't come just for money. Money is extremely, extremely important, but we come to work to do something that is bigger than ourselves. Yeah, and so me, the biggest part of that leadership is to be convinced myself on what that bigger than myself is. And then my ability and my role to be able to convince those around me of the same. Yeah. So I spend time doing that in small and big ways, looking to connect across the organization. I saw many good practices and some of the best leaders at GE doing some of this well. But for me, to be able to know what is it that is bringing, and as part of that, the freedom bit is very important to me, which means that inspire me on why you want me to do something. Don't just push me to say go do something. And I want, if I feel like that is how I get encouraged, I suspect others, young and small and old and experienced within my organizations and beyond, also get influenced the same way. Yeah. So this part around getting and coming to a common understanding on what it means to come out of bed and coming to work each day and making sure that we have that common understanding is very, very important. And in trying to drive that, the second part, which is the people part, which has been a learned skill for me, and through all the mistakes that I made, and an understanding of the organization, and understanding that it is ultimately people that make a change, and to be aware of what drives that change. Are they trained? Are they compensated? Are they passionate enough about? Are they do they have the right background? All of that. Thinking about that people part, hugely, hugely important, especially when you are going through a transformation. Yeah, and when you're trying to do new things, and everything from how we hire, how do we rate people, what do we rate on, how do we influence, what do we, the entire structure around that, everything, every part of what it means to be a performance driven organization, especially in the context of the ethos of a company. And that changes. I think what a performance driven organization means for a Thermax, which is very different from what it means for a GE, which means it could mean very different. And that to me is part of how the culture of that company evolved. And for a leader to sync yourself with that, yeah, you can't come into big organizations says, this is my culture and this is what we will do. Yeah, that part you have to be very, very clear about. And then the third part is that you will have to take risks. Yeah, so that bias for action has to be extremely, extremely important. Bias for action, making sure that if you said you're going to commit to doing things, that you're committing to making those steps. And even if you're making mistakes, you're learning from those mistakes, you're coming back, but you're always, always active. Yeah. So if you know where you are going, you've got a set of people who you think you have trained, committed, inspired enough to walk along with you, and then you're constantly focusing on action. I think that to me becomes the Pareto that I look for and that I look to drive.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Ashish. I think this is probably this is the leadership 101 we were looking for. That what gets you out of bed, people, and of course decision making, and that gets to me. Let's moving on. On the leadership essentials, which is kind of a offshoot from the answer that you gave just now, Ashish. Decision making, like you said, is obviously part and parcel of any top job, and your job definitely is a top job. And someone at your level needs to make a lot of decisions every day. And at GE, as any GE alumni will confess, is that decisiveness and fail fast if you have to fail kind of an approach is always encouraged. So, but I'm curious to know how an analytical and a thoughtful leader like you approaches decision making. How do you balance speed versus quality in decision making? And and the second part of the question is, how do you approach tough decisions? And if at all, and we all make wrong decisions, if at all you make a wrong decision, how do you move on from there?
In sports, we talk about playing on instinct. Yeah, which is a ball comes at you or a shuttle comes at you, anything, and you are asked to block out the noise and respond by instinct.
Do you do badminton, Ashish? By just a question.
Yeah. I was badminton. I was at IIT. I was
okay.
NSO badminton, and I tore my ACL actually playing badminton. So, but what we know is to get that instinct takes thousands and thousands of hours of practice.
Sure.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what sport you play. For you to be instinctive, to block out the noise and to play on the merit of a ball or a shuttle, and to be able to play something on instinct takes incredible amount of practice. And I think in our worlds as professionals, and there again, kind of taking the humbleness out, we will never be the sports people that perhaps when we were all young, when we were at least, we were 8, 10 years old, we all wanted to be sports people. Yeah, everywhere. But in some ways, that's the instinct, and all your, and in my case now, 30 years of work experience, that is what it has trained you for. Yeah, which is to be able to take decisions. But what you call as instinct is something that is honed over a lot of practice. Yeah, you can have all the analysis, everything in the world, but most analysis, and which is where consulting companies fail, is that they are good at interpolation, they are not good at extrapolation, especially in the world that we are in, where our everything around us is changing. Yeah, the rate at which technology is coming, the rate at which policy is coming, competitiveness, all of it. So in this environment, you can only take experiences from the past, but the bowler you are facing, the stadium you are in, and the game that you're playing is constantly changing. Yeah, so you cannot rely on everything that you have done in the past. You have to have a leap of faith in many cases. You have to be able to go, and to your point, analysis will only take you that far. Most of your big decisions, you will have to have an element of heart and head in it. Yeah, which is beyond just the numbers. That part is completely clear. And there I think you have to, at least I would really admire people like Musk. And you, I think Musk's biography by Isaacson was one of my favorite books, because we take in many of our industries, yeah, and especially the kinds of industries that we talk about, where you're building planes, you're building boilers, things like that, where you say, when you fail, people die, or equipment goes bad, and so fail fast has a very different meaning with software than what it does with the kinds of equipment that we talk about. But Elon Musk showed that he could build rocket ships in that fast fail mode, where he was making a lot of decisions, which if you were reading a book, you would say, this is stupid. You're taking big bets. But in his mind, he had some instincts that were driving him. Yeah, which drove his gut. And that instinct was developed over a lot of, in his case, intellect and just the passion that he had. But he showed that even with something like a rocket, you could fail fast.
Sure.
In the time that somebody built one rocket, he could build 6 rockets and get 4 of them to fail, and the fifth one to land in a certain manner, and the sixth one to land exactly the way he wanted it to. Yeah, so it shows that people that are much better than me, at least, can do that. So how do I take that into the work portion? Having a very strong bias for action. Yeah, having very strong bias for action constantly. It is okay to fail. It is okay to fail. And if anything, and that part I had even at GE, if my goals were such that I achieved all of those goals, and if my team's goals are such that we achieved, I would say we did not take our goals seriously enough. And then we didn't aspire for something big enough. I think each year when we start, I love the whole goals and objectives exercise. Yeah, which I think GE taught me very well. And I make sure, and I don't know, there's some statements that if you aim for the sky, you will at least reach the 10th floor or whatever. You can take that analog. But writing down what you are talking about from an aspiration perspective, and making sure that you're focusing on those actions. The results are secondary. Focusing on your actions, that I will make these bets, and win or lose, I will deploy this amount of capital or these amount of resources or this amount of capability in trying to chase something. And at the end of the year, you may win or lose. Of course, if you make 10 bets and you fail on all 10, you should question, are you leading them well, or are you even chasing the right goals? But if you're succeeding in all 10, you're doing something wrong. And similarly, if I may take a step back, one thing that I hated about the growth playbook exercises that we did at GE, where we would keep looking at 3 years out, and we would look at, we would be 10% higher in revenue. Our profitability would be 10% or 20% higher each year. And we would do all that. Our focus was on results, as opposed to coming back and saying, what can I control? Because you can't control COVID. You can't control recovery from COVID. You can't control wars, nothing. You can control what products you develop. Yeah, the projects that you setting up plants, IP, developing digital products. You can focus on your efforts and where you deploy those resources, building people, putting good people in good places. Those are the things that you can actually make bets on. And I love making those bets and seeing how they play out. Yeah. And if they don't work out, I think I've reached that point in my life where I don't lose sleep over that. I lose sleep when we don't come through for a customer, customers unhappy. I think we made promises to particular teams or individuals. We didn't live up to those promises. Something small or big where I think I did not behave well in a particular situation. Those are the things that I think I lose sleep over. Making bets, failing on those, I don't lose sleep over. And I know that if we don't make these bets, and if I do things right, sooner or later we will succeed. And in many cases, we are succeeding. Yeah, that part drives me forward, and I'm convinced on that direction very, very clearly. Long answer.
No, it's not a long answer at all. I mean, it's the perfect answer, Ashish. And which you said, my takeaways from this is 10,000 hour rule. I mean, the deliberate practice thing which you said, that you take 10,000 hours to be called an overnight success. So you need to deliver. And your answer reminded me of which you just said, there was a Malcolm Gladwell's address in, I think, 2018 or something, where he said that in this world of today, we are trying to solve the problems like puzzles, whereas we should be solving them like mysteries. Because in puzzles, the questions are known, the answers are not known. But in mysteries, even the questions are not known. So in a world of today where we are dealing with unknown unknowns, you can just do what is in your control, like you just rightly said. And then you just keep moving, and you have to have a bias for action, and it will join somewhere along the way. And even if it doesn't join, something else will join. And that's how you move ahead. And fantastic answer, Ashish. Thank you very much. So, Ashish, so moving on. I mean, now, if with your with your permission, if I may say, if I may get into some personal stuff, I remember from my GE India days where we would participate in that Delhi Airtel half marathon. You were the only person from the leadership team who would also run the marathon. And if I recall right, the year that I ran and you also ran, we ran together. I mean, you had clocked about a 2:15 or 2:20-ish kind of a timing, which was remarkable, because for a person with a busy day job like yours, it was a remarkable timing. And even today, so many years later, I see updates from you where you encourage well-being of your team through various initiatives and activities. So can you share some best practices with us on keeping a good, healthy work-life balance? And you just mentioned that you don't lose your sleep over work stuff, but which is work-life balance is very essential in today's day and age, where physical, mental, and emotional health of employees are so much in focus. So work-life balance, Ashish, how do you do it?
One, I would say, look, on at least on half marathons, I think the year I tore my ACL was the only year where I was 155. So far, I've been better than that.
155.
But I think that's where again the humbleness part is coming out. Yeah, so I'm not humble by any means. And also, I'll talk about a few things. Yeah, one, I was always into sports, and very early in my work life, I realized, and this was in my Schlumberger days when I left India I was in Egypt, and I saw I was putting on weight very, very easily. And not having much to do, some of the sports that I played, there was no way to play. I started running. I picked up squash as well, and really enjoyed both of those things. And over time, squash, after I tore my ACL, went away completely, but running stayed. And I believe even today, and I tell many of my young Thermax classes. Yeah, and I tell them I'm going to be tomorrow addressing a class of that as well. They're all in their early 30s. And my message to them will be when you are in your 20s and early 30s, you can do whatever you want to your body.
Right.
Yeah, and your body stays there, does it. But pretty soon you will see that your body doesn't respond the way it did. Yeah, a late night meal and all of those come back and they start to show up in all weird ways. Yeah. And so for me, the counter to that was burn off calories. Yeah, and I don't exercise that much actually. I run maybe 30 kilometers in a week. If I'm traveling, I carry my running shoes with me anywhere. If I'm in a hotel, doesn't matter what time I go to bed, I'll get up in the morning, get a run out of the way. If I'm traveling internationally, I love to run outside. And that's just my way of getting my calories out of the way. And I've seen that it actually running helps me improve my energy. Yeah, and so that part has just become habit now, and doing that for 25 years now, it's just become part of me. And I would advise that to everyone. Yeah, take care of your health, and especially cardio. I believe a lot. Get periodic health checkups, manage your diet, and it will. If you don't do that, it will affect your work as well. It'll affect your personal life. It will affect your work. And to my smoker friends, I say, you know, and I know you were one at one point in time. I don't know if you still smoke or not, but your best years will come in your 40s and 50s, where everything that you have learned, you will get the roles that you can put some of those into practice. Make sure your health can keep up with your brain at that particular point in time. When I came to India, I was literally signed off to taking up that health ahead role. Yeah, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but David Lobo and John Flannery practically signed me up to do that.
Because you are the fittest, probably.
No, I just come in. They said they wanted a Bakra and Health Aid was launched, and they said, "Isko karo." But and just going back to the weirdest things that stay with you, it was one of the best things that I did. It got me to meet the entire G leadership, two levels down. So forget the people that were part of John Flannery's staff. The levels below, I got to touch with. Yeah, I got to work with many of them. We got to do many, many interesting things. And there were so many people, Naved, Abhishek, so many people who, and the kinds of activities that we were able to do that taught me how India was also changing. Yeah, there were companies that were coming up talking about diet, putting calories on food. If you had to organize badminton events all across Gurgaon, how do you find courts? So that period in time, getting an app going to find courts and all that, we were able to do a lot of very different things. So it taught me so many things. And I thought I really loved that whole experience. That also taught me one of the best things, which was the first time we did the Delhi half marathon. Very few people signed up, and I was the fastest. The second year we did it, I think I was third. By the time it was third or fourth year, I don't think I was even in the top five. Yeah, and there were people doing many, many crazy things. And the number of amazing people that came out, the people that stopped smoking as a result of the program, the people that started to take care of their health, running, getting into hobbies of various different kinds. I absolutely love that part. And so even at Thermax, we're trying to do some bits of those. But that was a picture that I had seen before, and I love that picture. And we're trying to make part two of that picture in a way in what we are doing now. But it's amazing how quickly people take up these things and how India as a country, in a way, is ready to do some of these things at a whole different level. Yeah. So in the next 10 years, we are going to transform at least where health is concerned in a big, big, big way. And certainly the way we do health currently, we have to change. Otherwise, we are killing ourselves with all the bad habits we're picking up.
So well said, Ashish. And I remember those days where you mentioned badminton clubs and stuff like that. And I don't know if you read Peter Attia. I don't know if you follow Peter Attia's Outlive. I mean, these days it's The emphasis is not just on living longevity. I mean, it's not about living a longer life. It's about the quality of the life that you live. And like you rightly said, it's when you're working and all things equal, when you are kind of competing for a role, the healthier person wins. Broadly speaking, very quickly, if you can tell me the top three things you look for a candidate when you are hiring for someone in your staff or for a critical leadership role.
Um, for me, it's easy. X factor. Show me something that I don't know. Surprise me. Two, domain expertise. Having spent time understanding, going deeper into the roles, or whichever subject that you may have chosen in life, at least by the time you get out there. Third is loyalty, which means that you have gone through tough times, persevered, and known and seen that no organization is perfect and no day is perfect. You need to work through things, and in a way, from the mistakes that I myself made early in the career, understanding that loyalty and perseverance mean a lot. So those three things.
Perfect. Great, great. Thank you, Ashish. So I've taken some notes on that. And now let me get to some of the audience questions, Ashish. So Varun is asking you, can you share a specific example where you successfully navigated a complex challenge in a VUCA world?
Okay. There are many that I can talk to. And within Thermax itself, there are several. One, I talked about Thermax's own transformation, yeah, which is what is it that we are trying to do. It is perhaps the best example of trying to make a difference in a constantly changing world, and working with a company which is in a particular direction, and what do you do with it as you go forward. Let me take another example, which is Thermax has a business called chemicals, yeah, which is a relatively small part of Thermax. And for the longest period, it was of the order of 300 to 400 crores. And it did not fit as part of the energy mold, and kind of was managed reasonably well, but was a part of Thermax where there was always a question on what is it that we want to do, where do we take this business, should it exist within Thermax or not, variety of different things. Yeah, and as part of that, and if I go back and apply the filter around getting businesses and understanding what is it that we stand for and what is it that we want to do. And that particular story for the chemicals business was very different from the story of rest of Thermax, which was driven around energy transition and everything. The first part was to understand what can we do with the business? What should we aspire for? What is changing in the world that creates a need for our chemicals business to do something different? That created a whole soul searching exercise for the business itself. I saw a big transformation in the team that went from operating and how do I manage a plant well to going into an offense, and to coming out and say, wow, I have this whole world of chemicals in front of me. What can I do? And that was no consultant, nobody at all. Yeah, so the team then came back with a lot of different ideas. Then how do you figure out the common themes within those ideas? How do you take one idea out of that, create a small team, and say, go incubate that business? And we did that with a portion of our business called construction chemicals. And instead of trying to do something, the team said, I'll take a very specific product, take a very specific geography, which for us was the western part of India, very close to our set of plants. And I said, for 6 months, they just ran experiments out there. And each experiment taught us so much about which products are sticking, why are they sticking, why would a customer buy a product from Thermax, variety of different things. That kernel then resulted in a full-blown strategy around blowing up the business, aspiring to now a 3,000 crore business in 4 years, M&A, partnerships, significant amount of investment, all of those. Now we are going to execute that playbook based on the team coming back and showing that I have run these experiments very well. I know what I want to do, why I want to do. Now bet on me. So now we are going to go through the bet part of the cycle. And this is a business that has been with Thermax for decades in a way. Yep. So we are questioning. In one other part of our business, our solar business, similarly, we are trying to do something different. But there we haven't succeeded. Whatever we thought we wanted to do, our first set of experiments and all have taught us the world is different from what we thought it would be. So there we are pivoting, looking at newer steps in different directions. But I love that whole part. Yeah, I love that whole exercise.
That's so well said, Ashish. And I love the examples that you gave. One was where you took it from like tenfold kind of increase, and the second one where you said very, with all humility that it didn't work and you are pivoting. So I think that answers the question very well. There are a lot of questions, and some of them are repetitive and some of them are comments. Ashish, I like the question from Swati. She's asking you, I'm curious to know if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your leadership journey, what would it be?
I can say that because I gave that advice to my son as he was going to college. And the simple advice is
He's
there
in
are
the
many.
US, right? Your son is in the US.
He went to the US 2 years ago, which is that there are many ways to be happy. Yeah, and my to me the biggest example was a few years ago when I went back to IIT for my 25th year reunion. We had people from all walks of life who had achieved many different things. Smartest guys who were chasing one math problem all their lives to people that had become venture capitalists and all different things. And you could see what makes us happy ultimately is something that comes from within us. Yeah, and finding that constantly and finding that validation outside only leads to unhappiness and a constant desire to be someone who you may not be. Yeah. So, and maybe it takes a few knocks in life to understand that. And maybe those knocks are very important to get to that realization. But to understand that we each have our own unique road in life, and progress is not necessarily where you have reached, but how far you have walked in whatever path that you have chosen. Yeah. And being comfortable with that, being happy with that, and being happy in general. Yeah, I think, and that there is no one secret sauce to being happy. I think that would be my advice to my younger self, which I have now. So it's taken a while.
So beautifully said, Ashish. And I think eventually we all discover it as we grow older that all roads lead inside. They don't lead outside, and there's no happiness out there. It's all in there. So Swati, I think Ashish answered that question. So Ashish, a quick. This is a very binary question. So Fahad is asking you, who are some of the leaders whom you admire?
Many, and in today's world,
Elon Musk, you mentioned just now.
it will be quite controversial. There's so many things about Elon Musk which I wouldn't admire as well. Huh? So I wouldn't say him as a person. I would come back and say, look, I'll as a whole individual, completely not. Yeah, as a person, I do believe that if you want to change the world, it is people like them that ultimately change the world. I would say someone like Mahatma Gandhi would inspire me tremendously. Very controversial figure in today's times of India, not the newspaper, but India that we are in. Uh, Narendra Modi, I would admire in many many ways. My nani, who is somebody who my Nanaji passed away very early in life, and my nani had uh, five daughters and one son with no money at all practically to grow up, and all of our daughters became individually extremely smart in whatever they chose to do. They've all got higher education, married for love and for nothing else. An amazing human being. So if you had to ask me to pick one person, I would pick her as somebody who inspires me daily. But many, I'm very easily inspired. I'm very easily inspired.
Some great examples you gave, and I love the way that you said your nani is your biggest inspiration. I think that's the authenticity part of it. We all have somebody in the family we overlook because we always think that inspirational people should be outside. We can always find so much inspiration at home, and especially if somebody like that. So there is, of course, the general question, Ashish. I get this every time, and Aisha is asking you this: that what's your thought on AI replacing human jobs? And we are over time, so I don't know if you have got 3 or 4 minutes more.
I think I'll take this as my last statement because I've got one more call which I'm starting
Okay,
to
so
get.
let's take this as the
I think, I don't know what that future will look like, but it will come. Yeah, the rate at which AI is progressing, that future will come. You can either complain, bitch, scream, or you can work towards influencing and building that future. And I think as humans, as individuals, as policyholders, as a country, as scientists, we have a tremendous opportunity in influencing what that AI of that future looks like. And we should spend time doing that. Because if you just wait and you complain, it's like climate change. If you do nothing, climate change is coming. Yeah, you either shut up and do something about it, or it'll be a case of don't look up and we will die. So that's my simple answer. Ayon, and I thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. And I think you're a wonderful host. And it's a pleasure going through this hour with you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. We thank all of us. Thank you for taking time out. Really appreciate this, Ashish. Thank you, and have a great rest of the evening, Ashish. Thank you. Thank you, Ashish.